So to the risk of going back to the individual though, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career and something you would like to share about you?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for giving me the time. And yeah, so I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and um, my mother was a homemaker, and my dad worked for the Navy, but he also owned a barbershop. And so both of them were huge fans of music in general. So they collected music, and of course, the barbershop, being that it's such a important cultural hub, especially in the black community, it was very important to immerse myself in that community as a kid. But also, my first job, I was around 5 or 6, was to play music in the barbershop. And
Ah,
so, you know, when you're that young, you start to see the effects of certain songs and how people react to things. So I was always fascinated with that reaction to sonic responses to whatever was going on in the time. And so, I put Stevie Wonder on and people get really happy in the chords. You put Michael Jackson on, everyone starts dancing. So, you start to see the power of music and of lyrics, but also you start to learn about the music that not only comes out of the communities, but also the music that represents the communities, the music that and how the communities affect the music itself. And so that kind of cultural exchange between the music and what's going on around you is very powerful. So I never thought though I would pursue music as a career. And so, high school, I love music. I made tapes. But then technology started to catch up with things, and you were able to actually afford, say, a sampler or a keyboard with, in a consumer store like a department store. You could go and get, you know, a keyboard or go to Radio Shack, it used to be an electronics store here in the U.S. And you save up your money, you could go get a Moog or whatever. So in high school, I got my first keyboard, and I got in a group, and I was in this like Depeche Mode's electronic group. We did covers of Depeche Mode
oh,
songs.
Depeche Mode was huge in
Yeah, yeah,
Italy.
yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, they're still, massive. I just saw them 2 years ago in Philly. They were fantastic. But you know, diving into electronic music as a high school kid and then starting to buy the instruments, I started to make the music as a hobby. And then I went to college for marketing. And then, it was in college. Now, at the same time, I'm working at Tower Records, which was a big record store chain for those who don't know, one of the biggest in the world. I was the record buyer for dance music, for 12-inch dance music for DJs. And so this is pre-internet, so I'm on the phone all the time and making orders and making this kind of community from all over the world. Just all these different artists who wanted to get their records into Tower, and a lot of those artists that I made friends with then are some of those artists that I brought into class
Yes.
this quarter, which is crazy. But this was at the apex of a movement of different sounds that were going on. And so I still was doing my music and collecting instruments and really diving more into it. And, I started DJing as well at the same time. So I had this massive record collection because I was a buyer and because my parents were collectors. So I have all these incredible records. And so, I have my friends in Philadelphia. We started a DJ collective, and I started DJing not so much like, oh, this is going to be my career, but just as an outlet of expression. But then it became my career, and then I left Tower because I had sent out a demo that got signed, and it was one of my first records, and it blew up. It got huge in Europe, And so it was like, wow, this is incredible. So I went to England to DJ and kind of see what the
Mhm.
scene is, and then I came back and I met Butterfly Ishmael from Diggable Planets, who actually was one of our guests, and he wanted me to be in the group, and the group went on to win a Grammy, and I was DJing for the group. But I left Tower to join the group and toured the world. But taking that community that I had built through the phone, and every city we went to, including Rome, I would call up, and also Bologna. Bologna was huge for soul and acid jazz. There was a label called Irma, IRMA, and Irma was run by a guy named Gianni. And so Umbi and Gianni, they ran it. And so that was my first time in Bologna, and I met with them. And later on, I put a record out on their label in Italy, and Italy's always been fantastic for me. But yeah, and then I left there. I started a label with my best friend Josh Wink at the time, and it was called Ovum Recordings. And then we did a big deal with Sony Records, Sony Recordings, and we put out all these great records. One of my first albums, which is Silk 130, When the Funk Hits the Fan. So developing my skills as a producer, I started to remix and produce everyone. Remixed Solange, remixed Miles Davis, just tons of records and recordings, which I can send you a link. And then, I started to get into curating, so I started to curate different events at museums like MoMA PS1 or Cleveland Museum of Art or Philadelphia Museum of Art, and also doing cultural and projects in the community, like around Philadelphia and beyond. So, someone had hit me or connected with me and said, "Look, there's a position open at UCSD. You should look into it." I'm like, I never thought about ever being a professor at all. I was an artist. I've been an artist for 30 plus years and lived off my art. I never worked for anyone else after I left Tower Records. And I looked at, I didn't finish college. And so I looked at the description, and it was all based on body of work and
Mhm.
my history. And so I did it as an exercise to see if I could actually get the job. And I got it. I'm here.
All right.
So that's a quick overview of the journey.
That's great. So, we are all wanting to be back in the classroom, that for sure. But at the same time, I think that you have created a phenomenal pedagogical and teaching platform using Zoom, even if we never thought we would be isolated as we are. So, as we look forward to returning to campus, do you think there are things that you are experimented with this methodology that you will keep in your future teaching, even if you'll be in the classroom again, or we will all be in the classroom again?
Absolutely. Well, I am teaching. So the class you're talking about, of course, is Blacktronika, which I was fortunate enough to only have that class to teach this quarter. So that was my only class that I could really put my focus in on it 100%. And also, being that we're on the Zoom platform, it gave us me and the students and my assistants. It was an intimate environment, so it was very immersive because the music that we cover in the class is very detailed and bass heavy.
Mhm.
And so headphones, it's extremely important to feel it. Dance music, electronic music, it's about feeling the music and having your body react to it. Not so much in other genres, but in electronic music, it's very important. So for the students to be able to immerse themselves with headphones, but also have this kind of one-on-one right there, it's right there in front of them. Whereas sometimes in lecture halls, you're dealing with the kind of open, echoey acoustics. You're not going to feel it the same way. if you're in the back of the class, you don't see the details of what I'm presenting. And so I feel Zoom has been a great resource for that. But also, um, there it breaks down a kind of intimidation between the student and the guest, because I had guests each week. They didn't feel intimidated asking the questions to them, where sometimes in person they can feel intimidated. Now, that's not to say in person or Zoom is better than in person, because I would have changed it so that it felt the same as in an in-person environment. So like at the end of each class, I do a DJ set to end the class of music that we covered. I would have done that live, and maybe the class could dance and maybe get up out of their seats and dance. Who knows what that would have looked like? But I was dealing with the situation that was at hand, and being that I'm always on uh, social media is a big thing for me. Not I don't really like Facebook, but I'm very big on Instagram and Twitter. This was kind of a natural progression of bringing that kind of mentality of how I post things and deal with day to day on social media, bringing that same aesthetic into the environment of Zoom. The only complaint I have about Zoom is well, we're lucky because when I'm sharing computer sound, it sounds fantastic, but it's the recordings that we get afterwards. They record in mono, and I wish it would record in stereo, because I'm thinking of future classes like in our music department. You know, I teach music production, and also I teach music recording. I'm thinking now ahead of time, like, well, how can I make those recordings stereo? Because Zoom is only mono, and that's going to be a little bit of an issue. Not so crazy, but yeah. But it's been a great ride. All right. Music 19, Blacktronika, Afrofuturism and Electronic Music, an overview of a powerful course. So, to give you a little background on what the course is about, Blacktronika, Afrofuturism and Electronic Music, honors the people of color who pioneered groundbreaking genres within electronic music, using the intersection of technology, science fiction, and music's foundation within the African diaspora as a lens in shaping new futures. Researching the sonic responses to socio-political events that affected underrepresented communities, giving birth to jazz fusion, Chicago house, Detroit techno, UK drum and bass, the LA beat scene, and the rest of the global sound history. From Sun Ra to Flying Lotus to More Mother, we shine the light on the many that are pivotal in the modern advancement of electronic music. And I came up with that myself. So let's get into it. So I always start each class with giving a background on, whatever the genre is we're speaking about. So if it's house or, dub reggae, and the effects of the social politics around that period of time, because this is where the music was pushed out from. And so, for example, for this was for the class on drum and bass, but the root of drum and bass was reggae and dub reggae. And so I give a kind of social context of where this music was coming from. And so in the late 60s, 62, when Jamaica became independent, then there was this kind of separation musically. So jazz music, actually, which was a surprise to me actually in my research, was huge in Jamaica at the time. But there was this socio-economical gap. And so all the rich Jamaicans embraced jazz, and they were able to go to enjoy jazz music. But in the underrepresented communities, jazz wasn't played. And so this is where the sound system culture, which, if you can see my cursor, you can see in the middle all these huge speakers. So all the communities around in Jamaica were building these amazing sound systems. for the whole community to come and enjoy for free out in the open. And this became culture. So each neighborhood used to, want to have the largest sound system, and they all created these incredible versions of reggae songs that were specific to those neighborhoods, and thus sound clash culture came out of this. And also, a lot of Jamaicans went to England for more so to start a new life for work, but taking this sound culture with them to England. So that was just one of the classes. And then one of the pioneers of dub sound, King Tubby, also talk about technology and how that affects the music that's coming out of it, and the limitations of the technology pushing the music to another level. And so here's just a little example of King Tubby. One of the classes, just a little piece. And then this is a second example. I wanted to talk about the Paradise Garage and how, so during the disco era, Studio 54 in New York was the place to be, but of course it was overrun by, all the celebrities and everyone trying to get into the Studio 54 to actually to be seen, and just they had this Studio 54 created door culture, so they would pick who would come in. So it was like a curatorial barrier at the door. But Paradise Garage, as a retaliation to that, was more revolved around not celebrity, but around sound system and the sound that was coming out at the time. So you would hear records at Paradise Garage and hear it in a different context. And also, it's more geared towards LGBTQ community at the time, and it was very culturally diverse. So was Studio 54, but more so with Paradise Garage because it was more open to the general public, even though stars did go there, but it wasn't such a selective way to get into the club itself. But out of the disco era came into the early 80s into the more house and electronic era. And so this is Larry Levan up here in the right, who is was one of the greatest DJs in the history of DJing. Down here is Keith Haring, so out of this community, a lot of artists, really famous artists, started to come out of the scene. Down here you have Larry with Miss Grace Jones, who I want to do a whole course on Grace Jones, but that's another conversation. But I always show very vivid pictures to try and immerse you and bring you into the time period. And like I said, these are just little clips. This isn't a full course. I'm just giving you little highlights. And then out of that, Frankie Knuckles, who studied under Larry Levan, moved to Chicago. And so this is just a tiny little interview with with Frankie. And he was instrumental in creating house music. And so this is just a snippet interview, and we'll keep it moving because I know time is of the utmost right now.
By the time I got into like the 11th grade, I learned what it was to go out and hang out. I'm running around with Larry Levan at this particular point, and discovering all these clubs and all this nightlife. And he took me to the Loft for the very first time.
So you were hanging out with Larry Levan at the Loft when you were 16 years old?
Well, I met Larry actually when I was 14. 14 years old, so I might have been still in junior high school or something like that. And by the time I got into high school, then I began to run the streets with him.
And he was DJing then?
No, neither one of us were DJing. Yeah. What happened was the first time I hung out at the Loft, David Mancuso was planning on taking a vacation at the end of the summer. And I just wanted to the Loft would have been closing.
I always take little snippets of interviews of past heroes, but also I have, of course, I have plenty of guests that come into the class, which we'll get into in a second. Here's a little snippet with Barack Obama and house music. You know, Barack Obama is lived in Chicago, and he was immersed in that scene. And so this is just a little clip from a TV show.
In 1998, the Grammys presented its first award for Mixer of the Year to Frankie Knuckles.
We felt great about him winning that Grammy because this is a step in the right direction of them finally recognizing the house community as a genre, a real genre of music.
Frankie got more props in 2004, thanks in part to an Illinois state senator named Barack Obama, who helped lead a campaign to honor him with his own day, and a street in Chicago called Frankie Knuckles Way.
Senator Barack Obama presented Frankie Knuckles Way to Frankie.
He was so nervous. It was like watching a little kid open their present at Christmas. To see Grant Park packed like it was, I think that's when he said, oh my God. It made him really emotional that people would think enough of him to come out and honor him in such a manner. I think it blew his mind.
2015, the Chosen Few Picnic and Music Festival celebrates its 25th year in Chicago before tens of thousands. And a shout out from one special fan.
Hello, Chicago. Michelle and I are sorry we can't be home with all the house heads in Jackson Park today. But I still wanted to wish the Chosen Few DJs and all of you a happy 25th anniversary. Chosen Few Picnic.
That's so powerful. Powerful moment, but nobody speaks of this in academia, so that's why I felt it's extremely important to bring light to all of these amazing artists. And so I always talk about community around things. So this is an event that I did at MoMA PS1, uniting the community of Black electronic artists, and also hosting a panel discussion, which down here is Hank Shockley, Tasha Womack, who both were in the class this quarter, Dr. Alondra Nelson, Ursula Rucker, and myself, Rosh G, Eagle Eye Nebula, Shabazz Palaces, H Prism. But this was done in 2014, and I brought all of these like-minded individuals together for the first kind of Afrofuturism festival, and it was called Moon Dance. And here's just gives you a little overview. And then I had in class Shabazz Palaces in one of our classes, and we talked about Black Constellation, which is a collective out of Seattle that have been making incredible moves. And this is a video that they produced. I showed all of these in class. I'll just show a clip of it. And so that just gives you an example of showing the work of the collective, the music that is coming out of it. But also, I had More Mother, they're both good friends of mine, but More Mother I had in class. And this is just a little clip of the work that Community Futures Lab has done and the music that has inspired it. Just a little clip.
Community Futurism's Time and Memory in North Philly is a ethnographic research project exploring gentrification, displacement, redevelopment in North Philadelphia in particular. An iteration of the project has been the Community Futures Lab, which essentially functioned as what we call a living quantum time capsule, but it also had a gallery, a resource library. It functioned as a workshop space, art making space. It was pretty much anything, whatever the person who stepped in needed at the moment.
We had a conversation and said, hey, I think this would be very impactful if we situate ourselves right in the middle of the community, really at the point where it's experiencing rapid redevelopment, and be that kind of space and resource for that community.
Art should be as common as a grocery store. Like, it should be an everyday part of the community. We didn't go into a community to create artists or to bring art. We just came to connect it to all of the other things that were already happening and think of other ways and solutions for tackling gentrification and housing and poverty, not just the same old tools and same old language to do the same old things and get the same old results.
We're not looking for anything in particular. Whatever you want to write and add. Anything, pictures, poems, whatever we want to work on today. Folks can come in that are developing a poem, a song, a story, anything that they're really working on, and have constructive criticism. People just read their work, or sometimes they get up and do a live performance of a poem that they're working on.
Because of time, I'm just going to keep it moving, but More Mother is one of the most powerful musicians and voices of our time right now. And, I just wanted to, with every class, I try to show the community work of giving back to the community, no matter how big the artist is. And so I felt that was important. And also the community around low-end theory, which is the whole LA beat scene from 2006 to 2012 and to the present. But the low-end theory itself, which was a hub for this community, and all of these stars came out of this community or contributed to it, like Erykah Badu and Questlove, who actually was in our class a few weeks ago. So I always talk about these different communities and show the photos. And here's just talking about the movements that come out of these communities. So, for instance, yesterday we talked about the whole community around the acid jazz and soul and trip hop community coming out of England in the early 90s. And so, giving you an example of Straight No Chaser and how beautiful this magazine was basically a hub for like-minded individuals all around the world to send their music. There was nobody representing the kind of soul music that was a retaliation against all the kind of electronic techno music in England at the time. And so this magazine kind of bridged the gap between soul music composition and electronic music. And so yesterday I had For Hero in, but 2 weeks ago I had Georgia Ann Muldrow in, Ursula Rucker we had in. You can see my name here, which, I threw that on there. Questlove, and we had Underground Resistance. We had one person from Underground Resistance in. So I always try to, I'm a part of this scene, and so it was my duty to bring all of these artists into the UCSD fold. And so out of that community came Moax, which is one of the most powerful trip-hop labels of its time in the early 90s to early 2000s. And this is James Lavelle. He joined us yesterday in class. And up here, this is photos by B+. So B+, who I've known for years, Brian Cross, who's in the visual arts department, he's one of my best friends. And this album cover, which he did in 1997, is one of the most famous covers of all time. And this is DJ Shadow. And James Lavelle hired him to do it, and it was funny to watch their interaction yesterday in class. But, you know, to know Brian Cross was here really was instrumental in my decision in coming to UCSD. And so also Low End Theory, you know, I brought a lot of these guests, and we also paid homage to Ross Jew, who was a very close friend of mine who passed away, and we Flying Lotus, Toki Monster, like all of these people that came out of the LA beat scene, and a few of them we had here in class. And just out of that scene, here's a little clip from No Such Thing.
When I was a kid, I was just a weirdo. I just wanted to just change things. Even when I was listening to the stereo in my mom's car when I was a kid, I just always wanted to play with the EQ, stuff like that. Yeah, I'll just change like the bass and just drop it and bring it back in, you know? I started creating my own music in high school. One of my DJ friends passed me a couple production programs. I was just recreating like Neptune's beats and Dr. Dre beats, but also just experimenting a lot. I was always trying to find like all the options and sub-menus of, you know, all the different parameters in the software and try to like make a new sound. I was up till like 7 a.m. like a freak, just making music, just escaping reality.
So, just so you know,
after I graduated,
just, you know, we don't have time to go through the whole video, but, you know, our students can relate to these students too, because they're all about the same age as well. So certain artists that either I bring in or feature, a lot of them are around the same age or have the same ideas, or they're coming out of bedroom productions and working with electronics. They grew up with electronics, you know, grew up with iPhones and iPads. And so we got into the technology of things. So we had Don Lewis in, and he was one of the, he's never talked about in the history of electronic music, but super instrumental. So this is an interview I found from '83, little clip.
All of this music sounds like it's coming from a 70-piece symphony orchestra, but it's not. It's coming from one extremely talented man and a lot of electronics equipment.
So what I try to do is take the type of music that they know, which is a common denominator, and then I try to expand on that by adding the things that they would not normally think would be in context with that type of music.
It doesn't take very long before you forget the technology and enjoy what he's doing musically. And just listen as a musical work. Isn't this great? Say, oh, yeah, but you know, it's all synthesis. Well, who cares? I'm saying, isn't this a great work? Doesn't change what I say.
Well, people used to walk in the Hungry Guy and they'd say, oh, isn't that cute? He's pretending like he's playing with the record. Yeah.
It was like going to Disneyland. It was like the Electric Parade, but with one guy and singing.
So for the purposes of time, of course, we can't see the whole thing, but he came in class, gave a demonstration, walked us through. It was fantastic. Now, this is another example of man and machine and putting humanness into machines, and we talked a lot about that in class, and how technology really helped shape the music that was being created. we call him the wizard, you know. This is Georgia Ann Muldrow, who we had in class. This is just a little video from her. I'll just play super quick little piece, and then we'll keep it moving, because I know time is of the essence.
I like stuff that's like it's like a world music kind of thing, but I feel like a lot of the time in the world music discussion, you know what I'm saying, like hip hop gets looked over, you know what I'm saying, R&B get looked over in world music, you know what I'm saying, and like world music turns into something that like usually turns into like some kind of house music. But I'm just saying, like, it just seems like in the world music discussion, they don't deal with every part of the world, you know what I mean? I like bringing all those things in, you know, bringing different sounds and stuff, and the African, Asian stuff, and pentatonic. I like all of that, so that's what I was trying to do, basically.
So we had her in class, and it was beautiful, and it was great to talk to her. But I always give a background on, you know, give video, kind of bring the artist in, or bring the student into the artist's life before we even talk to them. And then this is just a little bit of interaction with guests in our classroom. So I took this from our media. So here's a little clip. Any other questions?
I have a question. Yeah, thank you for joining us, Ishmael and Kamei. It's like much appreciated.
And just for context, this is Ishmael from Shabazz Palaces, and this is Kamei, More Mother, that we saw in that one video clip.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is one of my students, Kalisha, who's going to ask.
I have a question. Yeah, thank you for joining us, Ishmael and Kamei. It's like much appreciated. Yeah, two separate questions, I guess, that you guys can both answer. But I don't know, with your work, there's like spatiality within like this American setting, but also this African setting. That makes me think a lot about this mothership connection that's so described in like The Last Angels of, I believe it's, yeah, Last Angel of History, the film. So I'm just thinking about how you guys use futurism to almost project yourself into the future. But I think the future is currently like the visuals of your image, of your sound. So how do you have authorship of your image? Because you clearly have authorship of your sound, but like how does that translate to like your music videos and the things that people see visually and not just sonically, you know, like how do you curate your lived experience, like visually? How do you translate that? Like, do you have much input in the direction, or do you let the director take hold of that? And this is coming from, I guess, the stance of a filmmaker who's just also trying to like engage in things sonically, but I feel so severed from both, so I'm trying to reunite both of them somehow. Yeah.
Okay. I'll answer first. It's a good opportunity for me to find a visual artist that we have a familial vibe with, you feel me? So I found that through one way or another, I always gravitate towards family, not my family I was born into, but the family that we find in the world. And then you get to meet people, like would meet somebody like you, and we would exchange and build a little bit. And then personally, I would, if I liked your stuff and thought you could bring some interpretation of the music, I would just hand it over to you and let you do your thing. You know what I'm saying? Now, if there's been times when I've been more involved in the collaboration, but there's been times when I'm not involved at all. But I still believe that even if I'm not involved, that person vibing on a level that is gonna enhance the music and bring another look and feel to it that is even if it's not something I thought of, that is something that I understand in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I get that a lot with the video that King Britt showed, the Black Up video. For some reason, it felt super familiar. Like, I feel like I've been to that place. Like, it felt like Chicago, Ashland, and like near the Green Line. It felt like a place where I've been, with trains and like a really similar setting.
And I wanted to show you that clip, and here's another clip, just to show you how the students interact with our guests. So in this clip, Ursula Rucker is with us, Mark from For Hero, and Stretch. But this question is geared to Ursula Rucker, the famous Ursula Rucker.
My question is that your experiences through your life and what you've endured, that's what makes the bulk of your content when you start rapping your poetry, or not rap, but being poetic and expressing yourself. And the beauty in that is contagious. I'm not gonna lie. Even Kendrick Lamar, like he's absorbed very much of your style when it comes to Section 80. I don't know if you ever heard of that album, but I myself, I want to know, you know, technology aside, resources aside, timelessness, you know, like I'm talking about no title, nothing. When you channel your lyrics, what state of mind do you go into? How do you absorb the experiences around you in a way where society's structures, you know, is on you, but then in that moment you feel free? How do you channel all that into your poetic stature?
Wow.
Great question.
Does he get extra credit for that question, yo?
Yeah, I'll hook him up.
And Steven or Stefan? The other question, Steven?
Yeah, that's Steven.
The first question. Okay, I'm sorry. I wanted to thank you, first of all. Thank you. I didn't remember to thank you. Yeah, Rod, wow, that's amazing. Thank you, first of all, for a lot of times as artists, we, you know, can only hope that someone would know that that's where it all comes from. You know, that it comes from, you know, that it comes from our pelvic area, it comes from our gut, from our inside.
For real.
From our organs, from, you know, like the deepest, darkest depths of our demon fighting. You understand? So I appreciate that. It is so important. So yes, I just that alone is overwhelming to me, because you believe it or not, we don't hear it that often enough. You know what I'm saying? That people understand that. So yeah, with that being said, you know, when I write anything, but say for instance, a piece like Return to Innocence on the Roots album, which is my most personal, intense.
And I'll go to the next. And so this is from The Last Thing. This is from discussion group this morning, like right before we're meeting. And I'm really moved by what one of my students said about the class.
Let's see. Who's next? How about Jake?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I mean, this is my, I think, 4th or 5th class I've had with you, Britt. And I mean, you know, you've been talking about this for a while and how excited you were to start this class. And I mean, you know, taking it myself, it's been an amazing journey, really. I mean, I'll describe it. I'm just really tired right now. I'm still kind of waking up. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, starting the class with, you know, the George Clinton and Sun Ra movie and, you know, all that stuff was, you know, incredible. And I really got to learn a lot more about certain artists I was already famous throughout the class, like, listening to the Common, just diving more into the electric circuit, another listen, and then learning more about artists I was less familiar with, like Shabazz Palace or More Mother. I mean, musically, it was, amazing. You would bring in all these amazing guests every week too, like multiple amazing guests every week. And I'm always wondering, like, how did you organize all of this week to week? Like, you really put like so much work into this class to make it good. And, just week to week and just very organized online. And I mean, a lot of professors right now, I guess, are not putting in anywhere near that amount of effort. I mean, even for normal classes, like I wouldn't consider this a class. This is just goes so much more above and beyond just about any class I've taken so far at UCSD. Like, especially for like a brand new class that was just made. But like, for example, like I'm taking 5 classes this quarter and 2 of my other professors just completely gave up. Like, one of them I have not even met. He's not even holding Zoom meetings, and we're just supposed to refer to podcasts from previous lectures. And the TAs are like grading both essays we have or something. And, I can't even contact my professor if I tried. I think there's a wide range of how different classes are dealing with this. And, here's this class where it's the first quarter it's ever being taught. And you have to adapt to a Zoom format, and it's still like the best class I've taken at UCSD. So, I mean.
So I just wanted to, that's the presentation. Just to give you a little insight, on where we're coming from.
Powerful stuff, really. Thank you so much for starting with your presentation. If you remember when we started chatting before we recorded, I was saying that I was having trouble with words and the ability of words to capture really some of the stuff that's going on. And as a writer, that is a difficult place to be in. And your presentation really put me in another place, because I felt again that words and lyrics and art, they are indeed powerful when they come out of the community. And I think probably the feeling I was really experiencing is coming out of isolation. And I think your presentation gave us a sense of how generative the collective is and a community can be. And that is fantastic, so powerful. Really.
Thank you. All power to all people.
Tell me about the students. Obviously, the students have responded so great. We saw in the video, but anything that surprised you, anything that, that you didn't expect? They were all very lively and engaged, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, one thing is, it's funny that, first I had a great team of assistants. So Kevin, Aaron, and Cherry, they were incredible, above and beyond, and very engaging, and they were learning the material as we were going as well and doing deep dives into it. But the way their points of view really shifted things in discussions, because they led those discussions even though I was there. And so it was in the discussions that really it gave a different point of view of the student, because it was very loose. It wasn't, we're in class, like Wednesday is the class, and so I'm up against time. So the last hour the students get to ask questions, which is fantastic, but it's so much information sometimes to absorb and then create a question. So it was in the discussion groups that the students really surprised me. And actually today was a good example, because one of the students was like, she's from China, and when she first started the class, she was unsure that she felt that the class may be hard for her because of the cultural difference and her not growing up in the US. She didn't know if that, having her, her coming from China and not having that context would alienate her from the class and from the ideas, but she said it didn't. She learned about a lot of the music that she loved growing up, and she learned more about the cultural references and the community that it came out of, that it gave her a new perspective on all the music that she listened to as a kid, but now can listen to in a different way and really understand more about our culture here in America. And so that really touched me. I mean, the students, they were all incredible. They were all engaged. We were all like in it to win it, and being that we were all quarantined, it was definitely a class that was needed, the way that we all came together. There was a great synergy with the students, and they're also talented. I mean, wow. And from different parts of the campus, there's one engineer in there, Yeah, it wasn't just music or visual. There were a few other as well. And a lot of people also were auditing as well.
Looking forward, what are your plans? And more importantly, can I do anything to assist? Is there anything you need as you think about the next few years at UCSD?
Thank you for that. I feel very supported here, and so thank you for that statement. You did ask a little bit ago as well, what were my plans for the course, like how would I implement maybe some of these ideas if we were going back to class. And I really want to keep Blacktronika as a remote class. Mm-hmm. Even if we were on campus, it doesn't beat being on Zoom because of the reasons that I explained. Now, even if we were in a lecture hall, I would say to my students, I advise you to get on Zoom, at least put your headphones on, even though we're in the same space. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever been to those silent disco parties where everybody puts the headphones on and you can't hear anything. Everyone's dancing with headphones, but the DJ's playing to everyone. It's kind of like that experience. It's like, I don't know how it would translate in the classroom environment as powerful as this in the Zoom environment. So I want to keep it remote. Mm-hmm. And I also reached out to the amazing resources for making it an online course. So I had a meeting with them, and I'm working on making it an online course this summer, just working it out. And hopefully for winter quarter, it'll be online. And then maybe one day for the whole world, like an online course that everyone can take. But the issue is, of course, licensing certain things, because I use a lot of snippets from different videos and that sort of thing to really bring out the class. And so we'll see. Yeah. But my future here at UCSD, I mean, first of all, I have to absorb the past year. So this July, I would have been here for a year. I still can't believe it. Like, it's such a great journey. Like, all my colleagues are amazing. It's such a beautiful family, and I miss them because, it was funny because on Tuesdays we would all sit out front of the music building and just kind of talk. I would just sit and wait for class to start. I get there about a half hour early. So I miss that kind of engagement, that seeing someone in the hallway and we spark an idea or whatever the case may be, or seeing my students and popping in on their studio sessions or whatever. So I'm very excited to get back to campus. Also, I love our campus, so I feel at home there. And I just like hanging out on campus. Like, I think it's set up in a way that is conducive to just hanging out and there's lots of nature, so that feels good. I miss that. As far as the classes, I'm just super excited to just continue how I'm continuing. I will say that Blacktronika, being it's my first lecture class, it's really kind of made me think about how to teach my production class as well as my recording class. And even though in those classes I did use storytelling as part of my presentation, I think I'm going to use it even more in morphing those classes into kind of a instructional / lecture class, like, creating this kind of rhythm that feels a lot smoother than it was before, even though it was smooth, but it can be better, and I'm always trying to improve. As far as what you can do, I mean, you guys are doing the best right now, so I'm very excited to get back in my studio. But I know it's happening. I know it's happening.
It is happening. It is happening.
Yes, thank you so much, because that's, to be able to be as creative as I can be, being in my office, which I love, and I use that as my studio too. It's a blessing to have that on campus, so thank you. Yes, but it's also a beautiful hub for, before the pandemic, for my students to come for office hours. It was fantastic. They would come in, and I try to have a really nice environment in my office / studio. So hopefully, it's with regulations and following the rules, we'll be able to get back to having students come into the office, at social distancing.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time, for your presentation, for really preparing so well and helping me today. This was great.
Thank you.